Good morning and welcome to JChats with Bender JCC CEO Josh Bender. Josh's guests today are Dava Schub, CEO, Edlavitch, DCJCC, and Jeff Dannick, Executive Director of Pozez JCC of Northern Virginia.
Good morning, Bender JCC community. Thank you for tuning into another JChat, our weekly conversation, live broadcast, shining a light on the amazing people in our community who are making it all happen. We have a very special JChats this morning. I am joined by my colleagues, my esteemed colleagues, Dava Schub from the Edlavitch DCJCC and Jeff Dannick from the Pozez JCC in Northern Virginia. And the first thing I wanted to start off by saying, as the new person joining the community, is just a thank you to both Dava and Jeff, who were among the first people to reach out to me to welcome me to the community. So thank you for joining me this morning on JChats.
Thank you. Good morning.
It's our pleasure.
Yes, I'm really excited to have you. And I wanted to start this morning before we jump right into JCC business and talk a little bit about the roles that each of us is playing as leading at JCC, but particularly through this challenging year. I wanted to open up just a little conversation about your background a little bit, and starting with, tell us where you're from, where you grew up. Jeff, why don't you start us off? Where did you grow up?
Sure. I grew up in a small town just outside of Syracuse, New York, upstate. Born in a place called Cazenovia and grew up in Fayetteville.
Got it. So you're not scared of the snow, that's for sure.
No, and it drives me crazy when we get, a quarter inch and the world shuts down, because I'm used to, tunneling out of the driveway to get to the street, under 6 feet of snow. So this is.
Sounds like a story you'll tell your grandkids someday.
There you go. I hope I have them.
I can appreciate that, having grown up in northern Pennsylvania. Dava, tell us, where did you grow up? Where did you spend your time?
Sure. I'm a kid from Connecticut. I was born in Cheshire, Connecticut, moved to Branford and then to Woodbridge, and was in Connecticut until leaving for college at the University of Wisconsin and landing myself in New York for most of life after that, until coming to DC just 5 or so months ago. So I'm not much less new than you.
Your season compare, I only have 2 months here in the community. Well, it's interesting when I think about my own childhood, where I grew up, and I'm sure both of you, it sounds like you also grew up in smaller Jewish communities, to think about how that plays into how we operate as leaders in the Jewish community. And I know when I moved from small town Jewish community to larger Jewish community, what an experience that was to see what it was like to be in a community like the greater Washington area and the DMV. It's like this robust, vibrant Jewish community, so different than the one I grew up in, a really tiny Jewish community. How has that kind of gone into your thinking as sort of being a Jewish communal leader and how you approach your work?
Happy to jump in. For sure, it affects me. I did not grow up with a JCC. I did not grow up with many other Jewish kids in my school until my last 2 years of high school, when we happened to move to a town that had a larger Jewish community. And so we had to work really hard for it. The carpool chain that got me to Hebrew school was complicated for a working mother to navigate, but we did it. And I actually would say that from a life with a less robust Jewish community, the sort of stop on the way that was transformational for me, I spent my junior year abroad at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and there was just something magical about what was a pretty secular experience living in Israel. But at the end of a week, as we were going off to this place or that place, everyone, Shabbat Shalom, and there was something complete about the Jewish environment that we were in, even though it was wide and open and it looked different ways for different people. And in many ways, I link that moment to my JCC life, because I love 25 years in, getting to say Shabbat Shalom at the end of a Friday staff meeting or walking out the door, no matter who I'm saying it to, and no matter what the end of the week means to them and what that separation can be for them and their families.
That's amazing. And Jeff, like, what do you think, growing up in a small town, how do you think that sort of informed who you are as a Jewish communal service leader?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, for me, my journey's been probably a little less typical than most JCC execs. I had never been a member of a JCC until I joined this one as the executive director 10 years ago. And I had a long career in the theater management business and moved around a great deal. So in my childhood, I lived, near Syracuse, and our Jewish community for me centered only around my synagogue. And then, time living in Dallas, 2 stints in South Florida, I've experienced a really wide variety of Jewish communal life. And only my previous job, raising money for the Israel tennis centers on a national basis, and then here have I really been what you might call a Jewish professional. So this is relatively new territory for me, but I have a background of experiencing a lot of variety in my Jewish communities.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to shift a little bit to sort of the role that each of us plays as CEOs, executive directors of JCCs. It's sort of an all-encompassing, I have a friend who calls it a lifestyle. It's not really a job, it's really a lifestyle. It's all-encompassing, and we live and breathe the roles that we play. Can be challenging, certainly in moments, particularly this year, an unprecedented year of leading a JCC and everything that has gone into that. And before we jump into that, but what are some of the things that continue to inspire you to do your work, to get up every morning, to move forward? What are those things that really excite and inspire you about your jobs?
Go ahead, Dava.
Oh, it matters. I feel lucky every day. It's not, that's not a line I would give in an interview or just say. It's true. If this wasn't my work professionally, it'd be my volunteer work. I think that we are all better and stronger in community. I think that the lens and the values of Jewish life add a component that is unique and meaningful. And I've never met anyone who has said, I don't want the opportunity to live a life that is more meaningful and more connected. And it is general but particular in terms of the frame we put on it. And I think that it felt scary to me to think about building community in a time that people are distancing. And I wondered what that would look like. And I still wonder, we're still figuring it out. But to me, it feels like it matters even more. I've always worried that too many people are lonely, which is not to say they're all alone, because many people live amongst people and still experience this sense of disconnectedness. And we look at any of our program guides or our websites, and in a normal year, we could be touting hundreds or thousands of things. But when we're at our best, we're really in the community building business, and we're connecting people not just to our JCCs or our buildings, but to each other and to a sense of Jewish life and a sense that they're part of something bigger. And that's easy to go to bed feeling proud of at night and to wake up in the morning ready to do all over again.
It's amazing the way you described that. I think it really resonates with me because we were all so fearful of what would it look like for us to close or to have restrictions on how we can gather as a community. And I've sort of found that the fundamentals of what we do exist beyond the walls. And I think we see that, the power of that. It's not just about sort of the bricks and mortar. Of course, we miss gathering with large groups of people in our facilities. But the fundamental needs of a Jewish community center really are more important than ever, I feel. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
So I guess I would echo a lot of what Dava and you said, but even beyond not being able to gather in large groups, to me, it's the one-on-one. To me, it's, you know, having a relationship with a staff member or with a member of the community where you get down deep in getting to know them, or in helping them, or gaining wisdom from them. And it's a touch, you know, it's a hug, it's a handshake, all the things that we're not allowed to do right now. And so, you know, we're trying to replicate it as best we can through Zoom, through, you know, distanced, masked engagement. But the joy of being in community at its most basic level, at a one-on-one or small group level, is really transformed right now in a way that is hard. It's hard for me, it's hard for my staff, it's hard for our members. And so I'm optimistic about the future, but I'm anxious about when we will get that aspect of community back. I think that we will be able to gather again sooner than we will be able to really connect the way, in a deep and meaningful way. And so that, to me, is the greatest joy of being an executive JCC, and the greatest challenge of what we're going through right now. But it's the hope of getting back to that I think helps drive me and my team forward.
Absolutely. I had the pleasure yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, of doing a Zoom with a coffee and schmooze group, a group of seniors who get together every week. And first of all, it's amazing to see how they've navigated the world and have found connection despite the distance. And yet I hear the longing in their voices and even in their ideas about returning to some sense of normalcy and gathering again. And as much as our virtual connections are really powerful, they're not quite the same.
You know, if I could just interrupt for a second, you know, one of the things that I used to love to do was to, if I found a gap in my schedule, jump into the lobby and play a hand of mahjong or a game of canasta with our regulars in the lobby. And I really missed that engagement. And this past fall, a group of our mahjong players decided to camp out in lawn chairs in our parking lot, just on their own. They missed getting together in the lobby, and they decided, why don't we just go to the J and sit in the parking lot 6 feet apart and talk. And that became like a regular thing for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's we all long for those moments of gathering. So next question, we can answer this like two ways, jump out whatever resonates with you. One of them is, what have you learned about yourself as a leader through leading a J through the pandemic and this terribly challenging year? And or what's something new that you discovered, a hobby, an interest that you only would have discovered through this crazy pandemic year?
But it's embarrassing to admit the first thing that comes to mind, it shouldn't be a hobby, is eating dinner with my daughter. JCC life for the past, she's, I'd say 25 years, but she's only 9.5, has not been conducive to dinner time. She thought it was something that we did together on the weekends. And now it's something we actually do together 7 nights a week, even if it has to shift because of a Zoom board meeting. But I really have valued the time to connect to her. We've all been reading and talking about how Zoom school has taken its toll on kids. Mine certainly experienced that, and the chance to connect and to eat a family meal together, especially as we've made a big move from New York City to Washington DC in August. We sort of get this anchoring year together in our neighborhood, in our community, in our household. And again, it's probably pathetic to put that in the category of a hobby or a new discovery, but I cherish it.
So I'd like to tell you that I've learned to play guitar, and I'm doing a lot more reading and engaging with my family more and communicating with my mother who lives out of town. But the truth is, my wife and I are watching an awful lot of TV, and and fortunately there's some great stuff out there.
You can put recommendations in the chat. We'll all.
Yeah. So, but that's like a release. That's like an escape from what we deal with day to day. And to your first question, Josh, I think it's reinforced some things that I already knew, but it's made them even more pronounced. One is that humor is critical, that it's very easy to get down or bogged down. And we need to find a way to bring light and humor to our day-to-day lives, even though they may be challenging. And the other is to rest on our values. And when we find ourselves confronted with hard decisions, where it's the lesser of two evils or the lesser of many evils, to be able to have a foundation that we can, a touchstone that we can refer to as a way of justifying, explaining whatever decisions we make. To me, that has been absolutely critical and a source of sanity for me.
Absolutely, and it's a great point. I mean, the decisions we've been forced into making this year are unlike any decisions that we've made from the past. I think one of the things that I've learned about myself is, I think our jobs before the pandemic always have a level of unpredictability, right? You sort of have your plan for the day, and then you come into the office and it happens and it's out the window. But here we are operating in a year where unpredictability is the reality, right? Every day is that, and what new information are we going to learn today, and being able to try the challenge of making a decision without having all the information always. What is the future going to be like? What are things going to be like in 2 months and 3 months? And of course, the ability to maintain that optimism, through, even the darkest moments, I think. And I think it's a good segue talking about optimism. I want to actually segue a little bit to something really exciting that I don't think was created during the pandemic, but has been accentuated, and I think will be even stronger in the future. And that's like the partnership that our 3 JCCs we've been exploring and expanding, brainstorming new ideas for the future. Let's talk about that for a few minutes. Now that some of this happened before my arrival, you guys may have more information to share, but I will tell you, when I meet with community members and I talk with donors in the community, they love the idea that the Jewish community is beginning to think about creative ways of partnering in the future. I think the pandemic has invited virtual partnerships in a way that we may not have thought about, but it's something really interesting to think about how we will all support each other and collaborate, even when we get beyond the pandemic.
Sure. I mean, I would start by saying in the nonprofit universe, resources are always going to be precious and limited, and needs never are going to be. And so if we get to look at our work and say, what are our assets and what are the strengths and assets of those around us, we're going to do more potential collaborations in smart and logical ways, not just slapping a name or a logo on something, but really to dream together. I mean, Josh, the example that I would point to out of the gate is, one of the first things I was thinking about when coming here was the summer, because it was, we were already in sort of a first summer of COVID where camps weren't running, and we were feeling lucky to be getting our kids back into preschool in the building with all sorts of COVID safe precautions. And I'm so grateful how the year has really been going incredibly seamlessly because of the incredible work of our teachers, but really taking those cautions seriously and thinking about what the summer ahead would look like, as we're not quite done with this experience of COVID, but wanting to be a little freer from a building and a mask indoors. And so, what do we have? We have children, and we have a passion for camp and a belief that that children are better in an environment of joy and new experiences. And amongst many other things that you have an outdoor facility where we really can have a joyful outdoor camp together with an outdoor pool with fields across the street. I know Jeff is doing something similar, on property in his neck of the woods. And it was it was a very thoughtful and logical partnership in the moment that lets us test something out and see what makes sense in the years ahead. I think that what COVID has given us is the trigger to experiment. And I said this early in some of our conversations, it's like, we can just date for now. We don't have to get married. You know, we can try it and see what it feels like and what it looks like, what works for our organizations. And maybe out of an experiment like the J by J Film and Music Festival was done with all 3 communities, which was wonderful, all online. And, you know, let's begin the conversation about what we've learned from that, what we think life after COVID could look like. And I think there's just a ton of potential. And one more in the partnership category that I'll just mention, because I'm so proud of it, and it's not related to the 3 JCCs, but early on in COVID, when I arrived, Federation was bringing together the network of our Jewish communal colleagues from throughout the DMV. And so I had the chance to meet an array of incredible people, amongst them Adina Kirstein, who runs GW Hillel. And I've just been really stuck lately with this idea that older adults are struggling with how to get enrolled in the vaccination system to get appointments, and thinking that older folks are technology immigrants and young people are technology natives, and thought, well, what if we could match GW Hillel student volunteers with older adults in our community, and create a partnership, both so that they can actually have the technology support and also feel less alone in the process. Don't need anyone register for it, because we have, with about 1 email, 400 older adults who are looking for support, and 50 and now growing in the cohort of volunteers doing it. But what was so easy was I had met Adina on Zoom, and when the idea struck me, I could just call her and say, hey, what do you think? Without missing a beat. She was like, I'm in, let's figure it out together. And we can make
it's an unbelievable way to support the community. And who knows what kind of relationship can be formed. It could be an ongoing, that obviously the loneliness and isolation piece of some of our seniors in the community. And then if we can forge some connections there, that could also be, even beyond the vaccines, can be really helpful. Jeff, how about you have sort of some of your own partnerships around camp that you're working on as well. So like this goes beyond just the Jays working together, but Dava, you mentioned the Federation, who's been really central in helping us navigate this intense year. Tell us about camp in your neck of the woods. You have like a partnership as well.
Sure. Before I do, I just want to give a shout out to Dava for that initiative with Hillel. That's brilliant. And I may steal a page out of your playbook and see.
We're happy to share. That's the point. Let's like do more together.
And also thank you for your leadership on J by J. I think that the digital collaboration was a natural because we could overcome the geographic challenges. We talked about the 3 of us coming together for camp, and logistically, the Rockville campus just would be problematic for us, but we are landlocked in a similar way to the way Edlavitch DCJCC is. And so for us, the natural partnership was Gesher, which is a beautiful day school sitting on 28 wooded acres. And with the exception of a pool, which if, right now we're dating and we may get engaged and go from there. But if we eventually get married, we may be looking to collaborate on getting a pool and some pavilions and really building out that space for Gesher during the school year and for our community during the summer. So that actually is a collaboration that has been talked about off and on since before I got here. And it took a pandemic for us to say, now is the time. And now is the time. And we're getting a lot of great response from the community about that collaboration. And it's going to be very quiet in the J this summer, but it was even more quiet last summer. So we're excited about starting that partnership with Gesher and seeing where it might take us.
It's great. It's great. And, it makes me think a little bit about another question, which is sort of as we begin thinking about what life looks like after the pandemic. And I think I know, I'll probably speak for you as well, that, we're sort of living in 2 worlds. One is, how do we continue to get through this year through the pandemic, supporting our communities, serving our community in the best possible way, but at the same time, being able to sort of begin to dream about and think about a post-pandemic future and what that looks like. And so just, I wonder, like, what are some thoughts that you have about, we've been talking with our staff here about our planning for next year. And it's like, on one hand, you have the lessons of the pandemic this year that we've learned about our community. Then you have the history before the pandemic. And so how do you move into the next year with some unpredictability still on the table as we think about the future of the role of the JCC in the community?
Well, it's interesting. Our county executive here, Brian Hill, when COVID-19 first hit, he and I were talking, he said, I'm calling this COVID 60. He said, because it's gonna impact us in 19 and 20 and 21. So when people talk about COVID-19, he says, I talk about COVID 60. So I saw him the other day and I said, COVID 60. He said, no, COVID 82. And I think he's right. We are in our budgeting process and our planning process for fiscal 21-22. And we are absolutely looking at that as a transitional year where we are still going to be wrestling COVID. So when we talk about a post-COVID period, I think we're looking at 22-23 in terms of really seeing it come into some type of normalization. So as we transition through this coming year, I think it's building on what we can do currently in person. And I think it's absolutely building on what we've already done in the digital space, which has been a real boon for us in terms of reaching people who might not otherwise have come to the J, trying to take the best of the COVID times and the best of the pre-COVID times, put them together for the best overall post-COVID times. And we're still figuring it out.
Absolutely. And, I was talking with the team at JCC the other day, and we were just kind of brainstorming and thinking about, even when it's safe from a health standpoint to sort of re-enter the world or re-engage in the world, how will we need to position ourselves to support our community, our families, and our children, sort of re-entering the world, right? And so those are all things that we're thinking about. Dava, what are your thoughts about planning for the future and
I think there's a great JCC muscle of agility and creativity that has served us well until now, pre-pandemic. I think that we, as organizations, we've had the ability to see a need, see an opportunity, and often to jump. And in this moment, we've used the word of pivoting. We've done that a lot over the past 10 plus months. And I think we're going to continue to learn from the experiences that we've had during COVID and before COVID. But I imagine that this will always be a bit of, building the airplane as you're flying it. And I think that we do that with a sense of thoughtfulness. I don't mean to make it sound sort of, frivolous or unpredictable. But if we waited to have all of the information that, the data analyzed and know exactly what the 12-month period ahead was going to look like, I don't think we'd be able to respond to opportunities. I'm thinking of a small example. Moments after getting here and looking at the COVID pandemic and the holidays ahead, in partnership with our director of Jewish Life and Learning, we just imagined how folks were going to be home on a Zoom screen, and that might not feel fulfilling for everybody. So we created a socially distanced walk in Rock Creek Park that had Yom Kippur related prompts and conversation components, but everyone went off a 10-minute increment so that you were only ever with yourself or with your family pod. And we didn't have the time frame to plan that. We wouldn't have known what the weather would look like or what the opportunity would look like, but it was meaningful. Now, how does that help me think about this spring? Would I love to be having Shabbat afternoon walks in Rock Creek Park for our community? Absolutely. Do I know that people that want to be together outside while that feels safer to do so? I think the fall of next year and beyond will look much more normal. And I think after a year like we've had, it will feel incredibly normal, even if that means that we're able to be back in our auditoriums for film and theater, but not filling every seat, that people, will likely be wearing masks, that our school will be, again, back operational, and the numbers might come back a little bit more to normal. And, teachers, thank God, will be vaccinated by then and feel safer. They really are incredible heroes right now doing frontline work, and the work continues almost unhindered. I mean, you see the joy in the parking lot and hear it in the stories of the classroom. So I think that we'll have a little bit more experience under our belts, and the world will be safer, because I was listening this morning, about a third of our country has had COVID over these past many months. So there's some level of immunization because of that. Then you add the vaccine to it, and it's been a crazy stretch we've had, and very, very real and very, very scary. So I just think we're ready, and it's not all or nothing. I think that's also what we're learning, that sure, it'll affect our budgets, because if you can sell, 1 out of every 2 seats in a theater, it changes what you have to fundraise for, or, if you can have a one-woman show versus a cast of 10, that changes the productions you're sourcing. But I think it's going to seem like a small sacrifice, considering what we've all lived through.
I also think, that in many ways, we talk about silver linings, and it's hard sometimes in the middle of the pandemic to see, is the lessons we are going to learn, and sort of the creativity that we've been forced in this moment, where we're always creative, but this year, to deliver our programming and services and to reach our community, has required a level of creativity that I think will benefit us in the future as we think about a post-pandemic time. Jeff, do you want to have any closing thoughts on this topic? We're coming up on our time. We're here at our weekly JChats here at the Bender JCC with Dava Schub from the Edlavitch DCJCC, and Jeff Dannick from the Pozez JCC Northern Virginia, my esteemed colleagues. So wonderful to have you here. Jeff, any closing thoughts that you wanted to share?
Just a thank you for inviting us to come together today and to share our ideas and our thoughts. Welcome to the community, to both of you. I went from being the newbie to being the old timer in a heartbeat. And I do think, it's going to be a challenging transitional period, but I think the future of this Jewish community in Greater Washington is extremely bright. Shout out to Federation and Gil Prus and the leadership there. Shout out to all of our colleagues who have really been part of our strength. And to both of you, it's a pleasure to have you with us here.
Absolutely, and I look forward to a time where the three of us can sit down, maybe around the same table with a cup of coffee, and continue the conversation.
As do I.
Thank you
Nice
both.
things, guys.
Stay well, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Thanks,
Talk to you later.